Hello and welcome to episode 241 of the Crate and Crowbar. It is the 6th of June 2018. My name is Chris Thurston and tonight I'm joined by Tom Francis.
Hello.
And returning guest John Roberts.
Hi, how are you?
I'm alright, thank you.
Good.
How are you?
What's all this Alex that's been on the podcast? What's that about?
Alex?
Yeah.
Well, this is the thing, like, once you've, I think I unlocked him as like a permanent DLC companion. Now I won't leave my house.
You have to complete the game as me first, then you unlock Alex.
Yeah, indeed, yeah. Yes, exactly. Like, his special ability is, upending the podcast with the invention of a phrase, basically. So, yeah, I think we just need to grind Alex rep until we permanently unlock John.
You got the taster of me at the very start of the game, but my advanced podcasting has been taken away from you.
I like to think you appear in the pre-game flash forward as a sort of end game companion. You know, in a sort of like, oh well, this is the end game party. But then after you all, die to the time beast during that prologue section, and then you wake up, and then you have to start off normally, and you hang out with me and Tom Senior, and it's and then obviously like Marsh vanishes at the end of the first act, and then eventually it feels like 200 hours later, and you finally get back to that moment again, and that
very small amount of screen time, and as such, I'm slightly underwritten.
Yes, but that often will give the community a little bit more to run with in the production of fan fiction of all kinds. You're sort of it's a useful operational kind of storytelling bit to have in any kind of expansive fantasy universe, which is what this is, obviously.
I feel I've derailed this as much as I can.
No, that's good, and never apologize for that. In fact, you do it more. It's what at this point the notion of a rail is questionable.
Distant memory.
As a sort of gesture at some sort of structure, we could talk about video game news, except it remains, I've said it's the week before E3 for about 3 weeks running now. It now actually is the week before E3, which means, there's not a whisper in the house of video game as far as I can tell.
Surely the big boys should be dropping their press releases and stuff to get ahead of the curve, right?
They sort of have been, but like, and we've talked about some of that in previous episodes, about the various battles and CODs and stuff.
Did you talk about any of the sort of Battlefields? They've sort of announced a bunch of gameplay specifics, just sort of in text.
Not really. No, we
this,
mostly made jokes about. I don't know what we were talking about.
I was on Reddit, and every time a post from Reddit Gaming bubbles up to the front page, it's always just them ragging on EA or something, in like the lamest, like limpest satire of just, EA, they like money, don't they? And then that post out with 46,000 votes. And this one was just a tweet from the Battlefield account saying, no loot boxes, no season pass, no something else, and all players have access to all the same maps and vehicles and everything forever. And then it was just that, and then like Admiral Akbar saying, it's a trap. But there wasn't any like, I didn't see any actual criticism, like why is it a trap? What do you think they are going to do? I guess it's just general skepticism. But anyway, I was just curious about whether that tweet was genuine, so I looked it up on the Battlefield account. It's quite recent. But I had to scroll through like 40 tweets that were just like surprisingly substantive announcements about like, one was just like, all guns in Battlefield 5 hit exactly where you click. Like, or exactly where you're pointing. There's no random bullet deviation. I was like, what? That seems crazy. So I actually like read up about it. I assume they're going to do kick, right? They're like your gun must derail.
First shot though from your MP44.
Yeah, because actually now you mention it, that's how the LMG worked in Battlefield 2, and it was crazy overpowered. Like it's supposed to be this thing of like, oh yeah, the first shot's always accurate, but because it rides up so crazily, you miss it.
Because you were going to hold the fire button down because of its cinematic oomph.
Yeah, exactly. But instead, support classes became snipers because that first bullet was really powerful and also totally accurate. But I guess they didn't learn any lesson from that because they're just going to do that.
Well, also, I mean, in a lot of ways, like the thing I like about, so like obviously they removed, for Battlefront 2, they got rid of map packs, basically.
Right.
Community dividing map packs. They added new maps, but they were free as part of events and things. But that came along with like the loot box controversy that like killed loot boxes. Because the moment, Disney is phoning you to tell you to stop it, you do. So that was, and so it feels like every year they remove another thing they have done that people hated. Yeah. And maybe that's meeting the gun design decisions of 2002 or whenever it was coming the other way, right? Like, they'll be sold in hard copy next.
There's also a couple of things that sounded good. One is apparently if you are facing forward, I don't know quite what they mean by that, but as long as you're facing forward, if you're pressing fire, you are firing. Even if you're like vaulting over something or your character's busy with some kind of animation, they'll just make fucking sure that your guy fires your gun. Because since that's like, iterating on these franchises for decades, and they're primarily about firing guns, they finally thought, what's really important in our game? Can't we just make firing guns like more shootier? Can't you just be shooting more of the time? And I applaud that.
Maybe that's the thing that balances the fact that the first shot is always accurate. It's like the first shot is always accurate, but you're always, based on the trailer, you're always vaulting, like sliding. You're never like
crawling backwards on your back.
Yeah, exactly. You're never standing up, right? Like
they did actually say that, like another thing they're bragging about, which wasn't particularly interesting to me, was like when you're all running towards a capture point, instead of all playing the same run animation, like some of you will be slipping on the mud and some of you will be doing this other stuff. So yeah, maybe you're just like sliding around.
Do you only see yourself do the coolest run?
That would be good. If you look down, your legs are doing the super cool one.
Yeah.
Everyone else's legs are sliding around.
It's a lovely idea, but yeah, I'm impressed by it's always the sort of the double life of the Battlefield games is like pure spectacle generators and also quite competitive shooters for a small minority of people who are actually, maybe I'm underestimating how many people know what the fuck is going on in a Battlefield game. But yeah, that sort of determination that they look like a Call of Duty scripted sequence while also being in some way dynamic.
Yeah. They're also changing it so that instead of only medics being able to revive people, anyone on your squad can revive you, but not with full health. And if you're a medic, you can revive anyone and to full health. But they're basically trying to make the squads more kind of tight-knit and depend on each other more. Which actually, I like the idea of that, because that was the best thing about... I was a big Battlefield 2 fan, and the only other game since then, the Battlefield series that I really got into was 2142, which its world wasn't very interesting, but it was the sci-fi one, obviously. But I got into it just because they made just a few tiny tweaks to the squad system where you got more points for doing things that your squad leader told you to do, and the squad leader got points for you doing them. And there was just like rewards for, sticking together as a unit. And stuff like, I can't remember what the first game was within, I guess Battlefield 2 actually was, you could spawn on your squad leader, and that was why Battlefield started to click for me, really, was just making the squad a unit. Because that's like manageable amount of human interaction. The like 32 players and the commander and stuff, all that stuff is way over my head. And the totally random deathmatch type stuff, that makes me feel completely outclassed and alone. If I have like 3 or 4 guys and we're just kind of muddling through, that's kind of my comfort level.
I think 2 was the only one they tried that commander position. I think I remember playing with it a few times where it worked out, but mostly it was just someone trapped in a box for half an hour who occasionally got to drop a Jeep on someone.
Yelling at everyone for not doing what they're saying. Why aren't you doing this? Do this!
I like because the sort of logic of squads in Battlefield was already strained. Like, the fact that your squad leader is like a, I don't know, like an alien queen or something, who can just sort of like spawn other soldiers. But now the notion that every squad has like some kind of special pact or like sort of like unique to them handshake that makes people feel better.
You run over to like your a dying comrade and try and resurrect him. It's like, you're not on my fucking squad. Get away from me.
Exactly. But that's the thing,
Who do you
right?
think you are?
There must be something specific. Maybe it's because they were all spawned from the same brood soldier.
They've all got compatible blood type.
Exactly. Whereas, if they're from another hive, then they will fight and devour one another. I don't like understand the logic of this universe. But, but it's also possibly like, I was thinking like an amusing handshake or, yeah.
It's fun to read the official blurb trying to describe how the resurrection animation is different, which is that you face the person resurrecting you and they face you without using the word intimacy. Really trying not to use that word. It's kind of more personal, and you see their face and you see the customization.
It's visceral.
It'll be a cool moment.
Yeah. You touch each other, you look into their eyes for a long time and appreciate what just passed between you. But as obviously that, you're both the spawn of the same brood sergeant, that is a forbidden intimacy. That must be very carefully managed on the battlefields of World War II. I don't understand this game at all. I suppose the other thing that was confirmed is Assassin's Creed Origins 2 Odyssey.
Oh yeah, and it's Sparta.
Oranges. It's Greece.
Right.
It was rumored to be Greece for a long time, and it's Greece.
And it got kind of leaked by a keychain, or
yeah, a bit of merch.
Yeah.
I think it was an Assassin's Creed keychain that said the thing on it. It might, I mean,
and had a helmet.
yeah, and then they officially leaked it. They might have unofficially leaked it in the first place, to be honest, because they do that. But
Yeah. Although I thought they when they sort of copped to it, they released a GIF of someone being kicked off a cliff in a very Sparta, in a very 300 way. I might be being overly critical, but I thought it was slightly jonky. Like the animation was a bit weird, and I wondered if they rushed it together because the news was out sooner than they expected.
yeah, I mean, no one made them make that the trailer.
No.
They could have just done the logo and see you at E3, which is what they basically did do.
Isn't it weird that you can just sort of announce what your next game is by just making a scene from a movie that you don't have the rights to? Like, oh, it's going to be that. It's going to be that movie. We can't say that, but
yeah, I mean, well, that's the thing, right? It's like, you know, it tells you immediately, like, what kind of take on ancient Greece are they doing? Because I had this thought about Assassin's Creed going to ancient Greece is that, I had this thought about going to ancient Egypt as well to an extent, but Greece more so, is pretty wall-trodden. It's wall-trodden. It's wall-trodden ground for video games, right? Like, Greece is not Assassin's Creed traditionally, one of its strengths has been, this is like a part of history or a setting that you wouldn't otherwise traditionally see in a game, like, you know, even the bad ones, like, you know, Revolutionary America or like Renaissance Italy are not like very common settings for action adventure games, whereas being a man in a big helmet who kicks people off things into things, I mean, you know, God of War just found a way out of that world. So it'd be interesting to see how that kind of pans out.
yeah.
I asked mostly because I didn't play Origins, so, and I know you did, so I wonder
Yeah,
if this is...
if the world is as cool as Origins, I'll be excited. But I worry that one took them like 6 or 7 years. This is going to be the yearly iteration.
Then,
Does it have a thing? Does it have boats or
I don't think they've shown anything
Just kicking
more than
people
that
down
gift.
holes?
Right?
not, yeah, the rumor is that you still play as, Bayek,
Oh, really?
in which case the timeline real fucked up.
There were definitely the Greeks were sort of were present in Origins and were kind of a plot thing. Like they were coming over and intruding in some way. I didn't pay a lot of attention to the plot, but the Greeks are definitely there.
Yeah. And if it's not, then it's a prequel because of the way history works, which would make it a prequel to Origins, which is just at that point. Just throw your hands up in the air.
Pre-Origins.
Yeah, Pro-Origins. Origins beginnings.
Pro-Oranges.
Good. Should we talk about what we've been actually playing? Because there's going to be plenty of news next week. John, would you like to tell us about a computer game?
Yes, I would. I want to do it carefully because I really liked it. And often that means that I can't find words properly and it sounds bad. But I've been playing Far Lone Sails, which is a fantastic little indie game about going... They describe it as a vehicle puzzle adventure. And it's about trundling over a slightly blasted, monochromatic, apocalyptic wilderness in this fantastic land yacht called the Okomotive.
The Okomotive?
I think that's what it's called, yeah. And they named their company after it as well, which is quite cute.
Yeah.
But yeah, you play as this tiny little character who feels like a young girl, but you never actually see the character itself because they're clad in this huge red oilskin, makes you look like a whaler or something. And this is just blowing around as the blustery wind and rain comes in. And very early on, you find this excellent vehicle, which is half boat, half train, with a little bit of 4x4 thrown in. It's really nice design. And then, you go inside and it's got all these mechanisms inside that it's up to you to control, but also like living space and place where you can hang things. So it's clear that this is going to be your like your home as you travel across the wilderness.
It has a very Inside vibe to it.
Yeah, it does.
As in Play Dead Inside.
Yeah.
So it's side-scrolling. I was going to say wordless, but actually there are a couple of words on the vehicle and you pass signposts and stuff. So it's not 100% wordless, but it doesn't ever speak to you. And the only, I think there were 2 control tips, like one saying left, I was playing on gamepad and one said left stick and the other one said B, and that's it. That's the only kind of communication the game has done to me at all. And like Inside, it does a really good job of that. It leads you in beautifully, and there's lots of moments of where you have to figure something out and you're given absolutely no guidance except just the inherent nature of the thing, and there's enough there for you to realize, oh, I think it works like this, and try it out and discover, yes, it does. And they've contrived the scenario such that what you need to do is kind of you'll blunder into it a little bit. Like, there are multiple times when you sort of crash your vehicle into something and it sort of works out that where you crashed it happens to be just the right spot for you to add some module to it or do something like that. And so the puzzles early on, anyway, I've only played like an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours. How far are you, John?
I finished it.
How long was it?
About 4 hours.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so far it's most of the puzzles have kind of been leading me in. The thing I really liked about it is just the sense of it being a journey. It's funny because that's exactly like Limbo and Inside also are just, you start on the left and you go as far to the right as you possibly can. But they didn't feel like, I loved Inside, but it didn't feel like a journey really. I felt like I was moving between, it would probably be uncharitable to say they felt like levels, but they were like scenes that it didn't matter that it was continuous that much. Whereas this really feels like a kind of, in the same way that Far Cry 2 was insistent on never taking away from your own first person perspective, the fact that this has all just been one long continuous line from left to right, and obviously the fact that you're in a vehicle, the vehicle has limited fuel and you're sort of gathering things from the environment to put into its burner to refuel it, and whether there's wind effects, whether you can use your sails or whether you have to rely on your engine, and running out of fuel and having to manage that makes you kind of focus on the distance you're traveling. In fact, there's even like a distance meter, right, which tells you how far you've gone.
It's a little chronometer, yeah. Yeah,
which doesn't, as far as I can tell, there's no sort of gameplay relevance of it. It's just a nice little reminder that, the whole game is just about travel. I
think that journey sense is helped out at the very beginning because there's a point, your starting location, it becomes, just through art and visual storytelling, it becomes clear that there's nothing left for you here. And then you find this vehicle and it's kind of suggested that something is off to the right-hand side of the screen. You might want to voyage over there, and then you go through loading up your car and then finding fuel for it and stoking the engine and stuff. And then you have that big point where you're setting off finally, and that sense of starting a journey is so strong that, it implants that in your head straight away. I don't think it's as, like saying it feels like Inside. Inside was quite a grim game.
Yeah.
And this is maybe melancholic.
Yeah. So far as I've played, it's been completely free of combat or threat.
Yeah, it stays that way.
Cool. Yeah, I think that's really nice. Because there's actually like, the fact that Inside is so beautiful and accessible is almost at odds with the fact that it's so grim and horrible at times. Well, maybe it's less grim than Limbo, but it's kind of sinister and spooky and scary. And I can imagine a lot of people who kind of wanted to like it for the art were put off by how nasty it can be. It is. Inside is definitely horrific. There's particularly like underwater bits.
It's sort of
truly.
It's horrific but subtle, which is worse in some ways, but it doesn't. It sort of lets you slip into doing things that are pretty horrific when you think about them, without sort of necessarily. That's its trick, I think, is without really considering it.
Yeah,
it gets under your skin.
Yeah. So the time when it tells you to pick something up, tells you what the control for that is. For me, at least, I was standing by what I think is a mailbox, like a little red thing. Did you take that with you?
I did, yeah.
Yeah, because it never particularly, as far as I can tell, there wasn't like a thing it was telling you to do with the mailbox. It was just teaching you how to pick things up. So I kept expecting there to be something. I didn't know it was a mailbox. I just saw I was picking up some kind of red object. And I was like, okay, I'm waiting to see what I do with this red object. Oh, there's a red thing there. Can I plug it into that? Can I do this with it? And then I realized, no, I think this is just a mailbox. I'm carrying a mailbox. How long should I carry the mailbox for?
Well, very quickly, because of its visual design, you get a sense that mailbox is important because it's a very washed out monochromatic world. And then it highlights important and interactable things in usually bright red, but also some other colours.
Put it in the furnace. I don't know if that was a bad move. It's nice because it doesn't tell you what to do with things. And what you can do with stuff is you pick it up, take it inside your vehicle and just kind of drop it there. Or I think pretty much everything can be put in the furnace. Like I've tried it with some very obviously functional, possibly unique things. Just tried burning them and it worked. And then also the other thing you can do is there are hooks around your home, that you can, pretty much any object, you can just sort of jump and drop it and it ends up hooked to that thing, which means you don't collide with it when you're walking around. So it's just a convenience thing. And so you can kind of take mementos from different scenes. Like often in a scene, there'll just be something unique that, like I just found a bell and I'm pretty sure it has no gameplay relevance. It just makes a ringing noise when you pick it up. And so I've hung up that bell above my bed now. It's interesting leaving that responsibility to the player to figure out what is a useful functional thing, what is a memento or collectible, or what is, arguably both. I found a radio and it plays music, and the game has its own music as well. Like it's silent for long times, and then there'll be just lovely music that kicks in at a particular moment just to kind of capture a mood. And I love that. And the radio music it was nice to hear it at first because you're very isolated, and it was like, oh, cool, there's a little link to civilization. And then I was just like, the very next section, the radio music was really going on and on. It was kind of like a little bit too jolly for what I was doing. And so I tried to be nice. I picked up the radio and I put it outside the vehicle just to put it to one side while I solved this puzzle, and hoping that when I walked away from it, I wouldn't be able to hear it. And it does get quieter, but all it really meant was it was only coming from my left speaker instead of my right speaker, which made it even more annoying. So eventually I just picked up my radio and put it in the furnace. So if the radio is important, I don't have it anymore.
They use the radio to really set the mood of various locations. You have that,
Not
the
for
jazzy
me.
bits and stuff. But then you find other stuff coming over the radio as well. Which is
there
not
ever a second radio?
No.
Okay. Oops.
It's just
The solution to every problem isn't set it on fire.
It's like, the thing is, I actually don't know if it's a furnace. It's kind of like a platform you put things in, then you hit a switch and it kind of smushes it into the ceiling and turns it into some kind of fuel that then goes into your engine. And the whole interior of your vehicle has a really nice, really feels mechanical and feels like a functional thing that was built to work. And there's just little quirks to how it works. Like the motor, needs fuel, and then you start it by pushing a button in by walking right into the button. There is no use button. There's just pick up and drop. And for pushing buttons, you just have to physically move into them. And this one, you kind of have to push yourself against it to start it. And you can just kind of tap it to kind of rev the engine a little bit, which doesn't do anything, doesn't move you. But if you have sails, then it will make the sails, no wait, it doesn't make them go up. Oh, if you have sails and there's wind, but you stopped, initially you won't be moving at all. But if you just nudge the engine, it kind of tells the vehicle, oh, you want to move, and the sails will catch the wind again.
It also releases the handbrake, which popped on. But
You can turn off the handbrake by hitting the brake thing again, you can kind of toggle, which is another nice mechanical thing. It just kind of feels like, it does feel like it stopped because of that handbrake, and it does feel like, it's traveling because of the sails. And
there's a really nice little loop between feeding the reactor, running down to the throttle, then waiting for the yacht to get up to speed, and then there's a pressure gauge as well. And if you smash that like, if you hit that steam release at the right time, it feels as good as active reload.
Wow, that's a tall claim.
There's it's not particularly tough timing puzzle, but it becomes a little harder once you're dealing with 5 other things. But you release the steam at the right time. The whole yacht surges forward. It gets some extra torque and speeds up, and it makes this amazing chuffing noise. It starts. You just feel the whole thing surge forwards, and this noise goes. And it's great. It's in there with active reload, and the Dota gold ching and the Counter-Strike headshot. That's how much I like this noise, because it just means you're done good.
Yeah.
It's great.
I didn't even realize there was an advantage to leaving it late to do the Steam thing. I was releasing it all the time.
Yeah, it leaves it up to you to learn how to use this machine just on a basic level, and then the amount of time you spend interacting with it, I don't think you can help but discover little quirks about it as well, which give it a lot of character.
There's just initially there's just 2 bars behind the engine, one labeled with like a diagonal stroke and one labeled 2 vertical strokes, and I was just kind of staring at those. I didn't need to know what they did. I was getting by fine. I wasn't stuck or anything. I was just like, I bet these mean something. Like, they're not speed, they're not like steam or temperature or something. And then as I kind of added to my vehicle and other things changed, I saw more of them. And then like I just now figured out what they were like in the last like 10 minutes.
The whole time
it's cool learning something like that.
The whole time I was playing it, I was thinking, I don't know what this word means exactly, but this feels kinesthetic. It's like this thing is beautiful in motion. The great wheels turning around when you have the sails up and you're riding along the top deck, because the sails are doing it. You don't have to tend the engine anymore. It just feels great.
Yeah. Yeah, it does have that. I've actually never been sailing, but it does have the feel of what I imagine sailing is like, where like it's a lot of work when you're in not ideal conditions, and then when you get a good wind,
it's just the best chuffing.
You stand on the top and you chuff away. That's how sailing works, I think.
When you get enough wind, then the big pipe goes toot toot.
Actually, I don't ever want to go sailing because I'm terrified the crossbar is going to swing around and smack me, because I've seen that happen in movies. And I don't see how I'd avoid it. I don't know when it's going to swing around.
Presumably you could gauge it from the way the wind was going. It's not like...
wind could change at any
It's
time.
not like a propeller. It's not going around all of the time. That's a helicopter. When you're thinking of there, Tom, it's a helicopter.
Well, yeah, definitely in a helicopter I'm scared of getting by the rotor.
You mentioned the text on the signs before. I think that's probably my only issue with the game, is the use of English on those signs.
Right.
Because the names they have on them are not particularly interesting. It's stuff like
Speed.
Old Town. Or
Sorry, the signs you pass.
Like literal road signs and stuff. It's like Old Town or Windmill or Sanctuary. And they just feel a little too mundane. Like, I'd actually appreciate the artifice of having them in Cyrillic or something like that, or just using iconography or something.
Yeah.
But I think the developers are Swiss, so maybe it was working great for them. Anyway.
I should put some nonsense text on it, English or something.
So I'm sort of interested, because obviously, like, you compare it to Limbo and Inside, those games gate your progress rate. That's the games they are. They're about entering an environment, figuring out how to get to the next one, where every kind of moment that you get to go right is, it's very rarely a game you play on the go. It's, you go right for a bit, you stop at the next area and you go back and forth for a while solving a puzzle. How does that work here, and how does that reconcile with the fact that you want to be going fast and you want to make the train, boat, car go chuff, chuff, chuff?
Yeah, to me it feels like about 50-50 time-wise between just traveling, plain sailing, and actually hitting some kind of gate or obstacle and then figuring out how to get past it and what you have to do to do that, getting out of the vehicle and sorting that out. But distance-wise, obviously, it's like 90% the traveling bits, and then the bits that stop you are, in terms of how much of the game they are and like physical space, are tiny compared to the distances you've crossed. But they take up more of your time, obviously.
Yeah, there's long stretches where you're just traveling, and those are just as memorable as the environments that you reach, the kind of upgrade stations and the like puzzle areas and stuff like that. Like, I think quite early on it's got a kind of day-night cycle thing. It's scripted, but at one point you just go through a long night where nothing is really going on and you're just tending your boiler. And it's, for me at least, it was really memorable. And then you come out of that into dawn and the wind picks up and you unfurl your sails, and I want to be a sailor.
That sounds lovely.
Yeah. Sounds great when it
Who
rains
made
as well.
it?
It's the Okamoto people.
Which I guess they've done this.
I think this is their first project, because they named their company after the vehicle in the game, so it feels like a startup for this.
Unless they're just really prescient.
Yeah.
Our second game is going to be about...
But I mean, knowing how the indie industry works, they're probably all ex-Bioshock.
Just statistically, it's likely.
Yeah, exactly.
I saw this before release and I thought it looked beautiful. I saw like a trailer for it. And I even like tweeted about it before it came out, I think. And then it came out, and I didn't sort of notice for a while, or, I didn't see any buzz about it. I didn't see anyone talking about it except me. And then I, finally got around to playing it when you, John, mentioned you were going to be talking about it, just today. And so I was suddenly worried of like, when I played it, I realized, oh my God, this is like, beautiful. And it's like maybe not 100%, of the level of polish that Inside has, but like pretty damn close. It's incredibly beautifully made and just like looks gorgeous, and everything about it is lovingly crafted. And I suddenly had this like horrible thing of like, shit, if this game didn't do well, then I really am worried. So I quickly checked its, no Steam Spy of course, but I went to the store page and it has like 1,000 reviews already. So
cool.
Okay, it's done fine.
Yeah.
There's no way it failed.
So that's Far
Lone Sales. And that's, this is petty, but it does slightly bother me. It's got one of those kind of colon titles and it's really awkward to say. And like, that's one thing that Limbo and Inside did well, was just like, our game is super simple and pared down. The title is going to be super simple and pared down.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of single word, just get her done titles. No colons, please.
I'm willing to bet they wanted to call it Far, and Far was already taken. I don't know by what. But I wonder if they tried calling it Lone Sales, because I don't know of anything called that, and that's quite a nice name.
It's great. I really like it.
And you've done a good job of expressing that without murdering it to pieces with this details. All you need to, to be honest, I think you just it's all in the chuffing, right?
It's all in the chuffing. Oh, that sound, you have to hear it. It's amazing.
I actually really want to know.
Now I don't know whether I've got the sound. I've left it late enough by accident that like orange sparks come out the back when I steam vented. And I'm wondering if there's something wrong with me, Doctor.
I think that might be it.
But I don't remember if I heard something.
If chuffing lasts for more than 6 hours. Good. What have you been playing, Tom?
I've also been playing Dicey Dungeons, which is a game from Terry Kavanagh, who did V and
Super Hexagon.
He also did a whole shitload of other stuff, but I learned that Dicey Dungeons is going to be only his third commercial game. He's decided it will be a commercial game, and this is what he's chosen. He started making it for the 7-day roguelike, and then which was in March, I think, and then he's just carried on with it, releasing free builds that you just play in your browser. And he's at some point he's going to stop releasing those and start, adding stuff to it that will only go in the retail version. But it is very simple, pared down dungeon crawler where the combat is based on dice. And the way it works is, there are various classes, but if you pick warrior, your most basic ability is a sword, and, you'll roll, I think you only roll one dice to begin with, one die. And the sword just has like one slot for a dice to go into it, and you roll one dice, and then you can plug it into that sword, and whatever you roll, that's how much damage you do. And then after you've done that, the sword goes away for the rest of your turn. And initially you might have like the sword and a shield, and if in the shield you put the dice in it and it does that much defense. So on their turn, that's how much of their damage you'll negate. But then if you're the thief, you have a dagger, and that again only has one dice slot, but it can only take the dice if it rolled a 3 or less. So if you roll a 4, it's just no good to you at all, can't do anything with it. If you roll, but the advantage of the dagger is it doesn't go away when you use it. It can be used as many times as you like on your turn. So once you get more dice, you get I think you just get 1 new dice every time you level up. So when you level 1, you have 1 dice, and you roll that every turn. When you level 3, you're rolling 3 dice every turn. And, if you're the warrior with just 1 sword, that's not really an advantage. Obviously you get to pick the best value, but you can't use the other 2 for anything if you don't have any other equipment. But if you're the thief, when you got 3 dice, and if they're all 3 or under, you can put them all in your dagger and do that much damage again and again. And as you progress, you find new equipment, and you get to decide which ones you equip and which ones you leave behind. You can equip sort of maybe 4 things at once. And some of them do stuff like, So because the thief actually does better with low values rather than high values, one of their starting pieces of equipment, once per turn, they can split a dice. So you put a 6 in there and you won't necessarily get 2 3s. You might get a 2 and a 4, or you might get a 1 and a 5 or whatever. It's random what the combination you get, but it'll split it into 2 and they'll be lower. And then you're, more likely to be able to use that in your dagger, which is good. And a lot of their other stuff will also take low values. But then you get other things like this ability will like poison the enemy, but you have to put 2 dice in it and they must total 7. Doesn't matter what combination there is, as long as they add up to 7. Or other ones where it'll take any dice as long as it's odd. Or there's the spiked shield for the warrior, where if you put an even number into it, it does that much damage. If you put an odd number into it, does that much block. And then there's a grip for the shield, where however much you've put into it as block, you deal that much damage. So lots of little clever things like that. It is obviously inspired by Slay the Spire, because it lifts a few things from it directly. Most importantly for me, the poison mechanic, which I love in Slay the Spire, where if you do 1 poison to an enemy, it does 1 damage. If you do 2 poison, it does 2 damage this turn and 1 damage next turn, and then it's gone. If you do 3, then it's 3 damage this turn, 2 damage next turn, etc., etc. And that stacks. So when someone's already got a lot of poison, adding 1 poison to them actually is a huge deal, because it's going to do, that much more damage. And making poison builds in this is really fun. And it's much more. It was a real breath of fresh air after playing Slay the Spire a lot, which I have, because Slay the Spire, you get really excited about these builds you want to do, and the game just doesn't give you the cards. You do not get ever offered the card you need in a given run. You have great runs where it gives you everything you need, and you have some runs where there was just no way to ever make this build work. And this is much more. Well, there's just less equipment in it, which is its equivalent of cards. So you're going to find everything pretty much for the class that you play. And so you find stuff that works really well together. And so you get that satisfying, my build all works together, and it pays off much quicker and much more reliably. Of course, the downside of that is that it's currently has a lot less longevity. I've now kind of feel like I don't really want to play the Thief again. I've kind of figured that build out.
Does it become reliable?
Yeah, and that's kind of why Slay the Spire doesn't is so random, and they presumably don't see that as a problem that they need to fix, because they want you to sort of be jonesing for that sweet run where you get all the stuff, but you can't have it every time, or it won't be special. I'd be interested to know what Terry's plans are for this, whether he wants it to feel more random, or whether it's intentional that it's kind of reliable. Right now, actually, the reliability of it is not a problem. It's not a big problem. Its biggest problem right now is you do get unlucky sometimes, and it's not because the game involves so much randomness that there's no way to ever solve this problem. It's because there are just certain mechanics that haven't quite been thought through, fully balanced, because this is a super pre-alpha thing. So there's an enemy, a snowman enemy, and the snowman has like 4 different. Everything's called equipment, so he has 4 different pieces of equipment, and they're all just throw a snowball at you. And a snowball does 1 damage and freezes 1 dice. And he can pretty reliably throw 2 snowballs at you. And so if you have 2 dice, he freezes both your dice. A frozen dice can't be used for anything, so you just can't do anything. So I just when I had a snowman with only 2 dice, I was only level 2, it was just game over, but it was going to take 25 turns for it to just slowly kill me without me ever having the chance to do anything at all. Fucking freeze! So that obviously just feels like a balance issue that needs to be figured out, because there wasn't a lot I could have done to avoid that. You can't choose to level up before you go and fight that. The only way you can level up is by fighting these enemies. You get a little bit of choice about where to go and who to fight first, but not that much.
Does it have a visual layer?
Sorry?
Does it have art?
Yes.
Is it pretty?
No. I think Terry's done all the art himself. He's currently looking for an artist. And yeah, so I think he's going to get it tarted up, which it does kind of need. It's got, you are just literally a dice with legs and arms.
I played a tiny amount of it, 10 minutes, because I played enough of it to realize, I've got work to do this week. I'm going to do something else. But I did love his placeholder music.
Yes. It's like MIDI knockoff versions of pop songs.
Yeah, from the 80s. I think I caught Careless Whisper for an entire run. There's a certain sort of like, this has to be free currently.
Yeah.
Sort of thing about it. But yeah.
He actually tweeted that, he's looking for an artist, but he's already found a really exciting musician, and I really hope it's Hadaway.
That was it. Sorry, it was, yeah.
Title music is What Is Love at the moment.
If it does end up being, I believe, knowing Terry, I think he could make that happen. If he wanted it enough, this could be the Hadaway collab that we've been waiting for.
I can only hope.
Where there's a will.
Yeah, it's really simple, really easy to play, and it's just free in your browser for now. And I think there's a new build probably out by the time you listen to this, because I think last time I checked it was like 2 days' time. He's doing pretty regular builds, and we can put a link to that in show notes.
It'd be nice to actually be able to link to an actual playable game rather than just a page.
What have you been playing, Chris?
So, on a whim, I've been playing Totally Accurate Battlegrounds, which is by Landfall, a Swedish developer. They made Cluster Truck, and they're currently making Totally Accurate Battle Simulator, which sort of looks like it's a tactics game, and it looks a little bit like the sort of love child of like Mountain Blade and Besiege, the one about the sort of like the one about is technically about making trebuchets, was really about making a big procedural dick robot. And so apparently every year for the last couple of years they've made an April Fool's game. So this is that April Fool's game, and it's out in June. And
fucking game developers can't hit deadlines.
Better than it has any right to be. So what they've said is they've put this out as a parody. Like, they've said, we're not going to support this much. We made this because we've been playing PUBG at lunchtime, and so we just made this. But it's embarrassing how much better it is than you'd expect with that in mind. So as a top level, I would describe it as PUBG or Fortnite meets Gang Beasts, which is a very good idea that someone should have had already. Except it is a first-person shooter, so not like Gang Beasts in terms of running around isometric punching people. I mean Gang Beasts in terms of physics. So it uses the same sort of art style and physics and characters as Totally Accurate Battle Simulator. Everybody are these sort of like sort of procedurally animated, sort of very floaty, sort of puppety, sort of spindly, physicsy weirdos. And you can, they basically don't appear to be very interested in making money from this. So, unfortunately, by the time you listen to this, it'll probably cost $5, but currently it's free. And they made it free for the first 100 hours, basically. And that might overlap slightly with Friday. So if you listen to this right after we put it up, it might still be free. And the money they're taking for it, they're basically saying it's just to keep the servers going, because they, they have no interest in, I think, updating it after this, maybe a few patches to get it working, which is nuts because it's been a hugely popular, and I've been trying to play it all day, and I've maybe played 3 full games, and in that time there's been so many problems because it's just collapsed under demand. Basically, because bizarrely, they've made something really charming, and I say bizarrely, but like, if you guys have been in this position before. You made a joke version of the game you're actually making to sort of poke fun at the genre that is big at the moment, right? Like, haha, we made a Battlegrounds game, except they actually fucking did. So you were these sort of, floaty, physicsy, floaty people. And the crucial thing about it is everything is driven by physics. So it doesn't say the environment's very physicsy, they're not destructible or anything. But you know what you were saying about Battlefield and the fact that, you can now shoot while you're doing anything. This game takes that quite seriously. Like, everything is a physical object in the world. Of course, you can see your own legs and things like that. Guns you pick up are physical objects that are in your hands. There's no kind of UI for that at all. If you are looking down a scope, that scope is physically on the gun, and your ability to aim it is based on your ability to kind of wobble it in front of your eyes. And it's actually not that hard for that reason, but recoil is a real and powerful thing, and it will knock you over. And it doesn't have any, and so, physicsy games or floating games can feel sort of inaccurate, and it certainly does. But the thing that ties it all together is when you push a button, something happens. So if you're leaping through the air and you go prone, you just fall the fuck over. And they've got good animations, so having to like roll around and get back up again. You can leap into a crouch, you can jump for some reason, if you press G, you will hold your gun sideways and start beatboxing quite loudly. And you can do this from any move into any other move. And there's a slight, there'll be an animator word for this. John might be able to help me, but like, there's like, you know, there's sort of inertia in everything you do. So when you're bringing guns to bear or just sort of walking around, your limbs are always kind of like,
interpolating?
Possibly. Like, you know, you're always moving in a really dynamic, kind of floaty, fun way. And so for some reason it feels like amazing. Like, it's sort of like, it reminds me a bit of like, it's sort of like the opposite of Super Hot in a weird way, but in a way that's more appropriate to multiplayer, where Super Hot gave you such fine control over the position of every single thing in the environment that it made you feel like super accurate. And it was a huge power fantasy going, you know, into a gunfight against these predictable AI opponents when you are more accurate than you could ever be in a normal shooter. This is the exact opposite in that it's a, like, calamity. Like, everything is calamity all of the time. And everyone's dealing with that at the same time. So it's not like, so it doesn't feel like PUBG does, for example, where like a stray bullet takes you out of the game immediately. A gunfight is just a fucking mess. And there's enough skill to doing it properly that there's an element of like, you know, fighting your way through it feels funny, but feels good, but it's so funny the rest of the time. Like, it's fun to drop into a really busy area at the start because it's just a scramble to find guns, to try and reload them. You see people like flopping through windows in this sort of awkward way. Like, it's very, you know, its collision detection is pretty spot on. So if you can sort of like fling your awkward ragdolly body through something to kind of crawl away, people like leaping through the air, then going prone to avoid a rocket and then being picked up by the explosion of the rocket, just sort of spinning through the air, but they might not be dead. They'll just sort of roll to a halt somewhere else. All of that feels really, really, really nice. And there's shitloads of guns in it. It has like every sort of modern Counter-Strike weapon you can imagine, including all of the guns from PUBG and then some. Wow. It has shitloads of like World War II weaponry. It has old school flintlock weapons. It has muskets. It has...
Is this, I don't know much about Total Realistic Battle Simulator, but do you think they just kind of ported all this over from that?
I think so, because that game also like spans a lot of different time periods. Right. It has melee weapons and swords and things like that. It has crossbows, and it has like this huge collection of grenades. So you have like a regular grenade, and I might just tell some stories from it because there's a better way of illustrating it, but you get like a grenade that's like a bundle of arrows attached to some explosives, and you fire it, and then it shoots up into the air, and then it fires arrows down. So it's like an anti-taking cover grenade. It has an implosion grenade, and then a push grenade. It has, like the sort of shrapnel grenade from Team Fortress, basically, in one form or another. It has that kind of like just every idea thrown at the wall sort of thing. It has a grenade that makes a wall. Like you plant it and it grows out of the ground in front of you.
So
like
you throw your ideas at it.
Yeah. Yeah, indeed. Yeah. And so, and also, because they don't, there's, you know, microtransactions, you have full access to sort of character customization from the start. So by default, you're just this sort of like weird sock man, kind of spindly armed sock dude. And you can randomize your look or put different clothes on. And so my character has a full wizard's beard and is smoking a little pipe with a big wizard's hat on. He's a wizard, basically, but in like a bathrobe, but completely naked under the bathrobe, and it's completely open at the front. He doesn't have genitals, so it's not, but I look like a sort of like surf bomb, sort of Gandalf. I did think of the phrase, tactless beach wizard, but I didn't want to throw that at you, just, you know. And so, yeah, and then there's those little weird touches that are still quite cool. So it's got a dumb map, basically. Like, they've just given up on naming some places. There's like industry, which is the big factory area, and next to that is industry forest. And there's a place called Chaos, where they've just taken a normal town's worth of buildings and put them in a big pile, and a lot of them are upside down. Like, you know, it has this air of like, we didn't fucking try, and yet it's annoyingly good. You ride in at the start, rather than being in a plane, you ride in on on the convoy of flying trucks from Cluster Truck. And then when you deploy, instead of like parachuting, you're shot like a rocket in like a random direction, and you can sort of steer yourself in the air like Superman, but you're falling, and you just have to kind of like crash into the ground. And when you, based on the angle of your descent, you do then roll, like you know, it's not this sort of accurate landing. And this huge plume of smoke comes up where you land, so you can see what other players are landing, and people like flinging themselves like rockets into the environment. And then its version of the circle that contracts and pushes you in is a wall, and the way it works is, as the wall as it shrinks, these obelisks fly in from the edge of the map, vast kind of things. It's got this sort of like pastel, sort of low detail texture, but quite nice art style. They fly in, and then they rise up in the air and they slam into the ground, and you can hear it everywhere. And then they sort of spawn more obelisks sideways until they complete the wall. And then they will then spawn another set of obelisks that then come in and shrink it further. And so you can be in a situation where you're sprinting to try and, you know, you're lagging behind the obelisks, but if you can make it through the gap between them before they close off, you can kind of get into the next zone. And like the first time I played it, I did what I would normally do in PUBG and landed sort of somewhere remote, and I ended up coming second. I came second basically only because I didn't know what an implosion grenade did and, killed myself, with one. But I got one of my first gunfight, and it was against a team. They don't give a shit about balance, really. So if you are queuing with your mates as a group, you get matched with people who are playing solo. Like, it's not fair necessarily. My first little encounter was with 2 people, and right at the beginning of the game, I'd found this like big red minigun, but I'd never fired it. I just had it, and I had a rifle, and I managed to down one of them with my rifle, and then the other one was pinning me down, so I was like, okay, well, it's time for the big red minigun. Except the big red minigun, I didn't realize this, its intent is not that it's a gun. The recoil on it is so severe, it's basically a jetpack. And so I just start flying backwards like faster, and I fly backwards so fast I go back out of the circle. And I have to like propel myself into the air. And I can just imagine, and obviously this is all physicsy, so I can just imagine this other player watching me shoot backwards, and then fly up into the air, and then come all the way around and land behind them, kill the guy on the ground with the gun that doesn't shoot me through time, basically, and then kill the other guy. And it is just this sort of like madcap, extremely silly. Like, it's more fun because, you know, I imagine if you're really into accurate shooters, it's probably quite frustrating, but it's more fun because it's such a mess, basically. But the big downside today was that, and actually, you know, it's had server problems all day, and there's been lots of different kinds of server problems, from it simply refusing to put you in a game to it putting you in a game, but the game never filling up and therefore never starting. It's 40 players rather than the sort of PUBG 100. It loads you into the map and you can run around with no weapons or anything, and then it starts. And then, the thing that kept happening to me, which is heartbreaking, where it starts the game, but not for every single person who's connected. So you watch a lot of people disappear and some people just left behind. But what this resulted in is a game I played most of the afternoon where a sort of most semi-nude wizard man would just go up to people while waiting to join into a game and start beatboxing and start tapping the crouch key to the beat. And so I start bouncing up and down, like, and having a good time, and just watching people get into it as well. And you can type, you can chat in game, and it appears as a speech bubble above your head, and your character goes like, and it just became like, it was just sort of almost pure, even though it was because the game didn't work. And a few people were like, one guy said, this game hasn't got any players. And I was like, I think you'll find that it does. And started beatboxing and like bouncing up and down again. And he said lol, and then he disconnected. But though, like, I haven't had that kind of interaction with a strange multiplayer game for quite a while, like purely positive in that, he left immediately. Like,
it's the most positive interaction you can have with a game.
But like, genuinely, like, I think it's server difficulties and the fact that the developers have openly made it as a joke and don't intend to support it. Both mean that I don't know if I would necessarily recommend people play it. Like, what I would like to happen is for it to become like a cult hit that they then almost have to support, and therefore it'd be worth people's $5. Cause like, you know, I probably had $5 worth of fun out of it so far, to be honest. But if there are no players left by the weekend, or if it just doesn't work, then it's obviously not worth it. There is
Sounds like it's going to have plenty of players. Because, like, Total Realistic Battle Simulator is big enough that I've heard of it without sort of, you know, seeking it out or anything. Like, I think that's a pretty big hit. And obviously this is a winning combination. But yeah, if they just don't want to make it, that could be a problem.
Yeah. It's sort of, it feels like they've accidentally, like, they've just sort of done a fortnight on the, on the down low. And yeah, maybe that's a bit of a danger for indie devs. Like, don't do this if you really want to make something else.
Yeah, that, as you say, that was a problem with our April Fools that you did, John, for Gunpoint, where we turned it into third person
cover
shooter. And, that by itself, like on paper, that sounds like, oh, that's a really bad idea. It'll be really funny. But then, the style you did was like sprites kind of, snapping to 3D crates and stuff. And it just looks so cool. And everyone was like, I want to play this. I'm like, shit.
But yeah, like it's, I hope, I hope it is a success because I just sort of immediately super charmed by it. And it's almost like it's got helicopters in it. It's got working helicopters and muscle cars.
Does it have that frustration that Jelly Baby Wrestling,
Gang Beasts.
I have with that in that I can identify something that I want to do and just be so fucked up by the controls and the physics that it's incredibly frustrating for me.
Not really. It's different to Gang Beasts in that you kind of fall over when you want to fall over. Like you have to press Z to fall over, much like you must press G to begin beatboxing. I should stress the first time I fired the big red minigun, I also pressed G to fire it sideways. So I did stop beatboxing and then flying away, which is a power play, really. It's like, I don't wish to be part of this fight. Goodbye. You can also rocket jump with shotguns and things, which is nice.
I wonder, it actually sounds a little bit close to Sub Rosa, game by Alex Austin, which is long been in development, where everything's extremely physicsy. There are no canned animations, I think, for walking. It's all, as you're walking, you are physically simulated. And to do a cool, somersault, you must run forwards, press space to jump, and then move your mouse down so that, rotating your view will actually physically rotate your character. And if you get it slightly wrong, you'll land on your ass or your head. And the difference is that one is it's not trying to do a battle royale thing. As far as I know, it seems to be a sort of simulator for tense, gang deals, sort of trading briefcases and hostages and things, and multiplayer. Yeah, and everyone's kind of got to figure out whether they're going to betray each other and stuff like that. But yeah, that's been going down that physicsy route for a long time.
This feels more like, it's not hard to control. It feels more like you're controlling a point above your character's head that you're sort of holding and you sort of drag it around. The character sort of follows, and you control their arms as well. And you can shoot accurately if you try. It's just often hard because it's silly. There's, and the environment's kind of get in your way. But the silliness and the inaccuracy of the guns, I think, it's a testament to the fact that inaccuracy can be fun. Actually, maybe this reflects to the Battlefield conversation. It's more fun to be in a mad sort of melee in that game than I think it is in PUBG, because everyone's sort of in the same boat. It's probably wildly open to botting and stuff. And if you bot this game, then I think there's sort of no saving you. It's fun, really. But that sort of the slapstick of it means that you don't, you miss constantly, but so does everyone else. So you're not getting sort of frustrated. It's just daft. And there's a sort of element of not necessarily survival of the fittest, but there's a sort of, it's a great equalizer. The fact that everyone's falling over all the time and flopping along on their bellies and sort of rolling around.
It's making me think back, in the days of Modern Warfare multiplayer. I played that on 360 and PC, and I infinitely preferred the 360 version because pads are shitter. And it was harder to shoot, specifically in the Counter-Strike sense of shooting, where you snipe someone in the head across the whole map, and encounters are very, very brief and highly accurate. Whereas on the console, everything was just mad. And you do have people sprinting across open terrain, and everyone would be firing as they went, and bullets ricocheting everywhere because you weren't particularly accurate and stuff like that. It felt like a good solution to having lethal weapons that felt good and impactful, but also having prolonged, interesting firefights.
Yeah.
And they've solved that with Jelly Baby.
Unrobing
wizards.
Jelly Baby floppy men.
Yeah.
This is a slight deviation, but does anyone know if TF2 on the consoles ever got updated? Did it ever get any new content or anything?
I think so.
Because I remember it was like, most of the time, well, I think all the time I was following that game and, playing all the new updates. I think for all of that time, the console version was literally just a vanilla launch thing. And I think it's a testament to how much they did add in those updates and how good those updates were, that looking at that was so sad for me. It was just like the idea of these people playing in the version with like no new weapons and no like 5 maps or whatever it had at launch.
And just the hats you're given.
Yeah. Yeah. The hat that's glued to your head. It was, there were loads of people on PC sort of crying out for like, oh, you've ruined it with like the piss jars and stuff. And I want the traditional experience. And I wonder if those people, fired it up on console. Oh shit, this is actually really dull.
Other good thing about Totally Accurate Battlegrounds is you can punch very quickly. You can punch basically as fast as you can click when you don't have weapon equipped.
Semi-auto punch.
But when you punch, as far as I can tell, your fist comes from like any random direction on the top half of your body, and you alternate hands if you are punching rapidly, which means that you're constantly doing like, it's not just left hook, right hook, left hook, right hook. Sometimes it's like left and then a different upper left arm, which is, again, and it's actually animating this in third person as well. It's just, your arms are just sort of flailing around and coming from weird angles. But watching two people attempt to punch each other to death at the beginning of the game is brilliant. It's just this sort of, and yeah, like I did that to somebody and managed to like, punch him until he was knocked down, at which point I know, oh, he's got a teammate, and then I look up and a guy shoots me in the chest with a sawn-off shotgun, which doesn't kill me, but like picks me up in the air and just throws me into a river. And it's like, which is, that's a good moment in PUBG when something like that happens, but that's the end of the game, whereas this, it's just a sort of another
setback.
Yeah, I think I don't like dying early in it, because if you die early, you risk, at the moment, you run the gauntlet of its server issues again to get another game. But if it were running perfectly, then honestly, like, I might genuinely just play it all day. Like, very impressed.
Do you have health?
Yeah.
Okay.
You can pick up health kits or attachments for guns. You can get laser sights to the amount that it'll help you. Like, it's got, hilariously, because its weapons are physical objects in the game, and you can get like an AWP sniper rifle and then fit it with the extended barrel, which makes it like a good 6 feet long, at which point, like, it's a physical object in the game. If you're going around a corner, you might have to go all the way around the corner before you can get the AWP. Like, have you ever seen like one of those videos or something of like a dog with a stick in its mouth trying to get through a gate and not understanding why it can't get through the gate because it fits? Like, you get that situation where you can't, like, it's not like other shooters where the gun is just a visual thing that you are looking at, but doesn't actually exist in the world. Like, guns can't clip through walls in this game because you go up to the wall to try and shoot over it, and your gun gets sort of like bangs against it, and then you can put your gun underneath someone else's gun and lift it up to lift their gun into the air.
Why are you shooting the sky? Why are you shooting the sky?
Yeah. Which also works with the melee weapons, which, if it wasn't so silly, would be the basis for like quite a robust melee combat system. You can get sort of like full body shields and things that you can run around behind, and man, it's great. Why did they make this by accident as a joke? Like,
I suspect all of them are looking at like how fun it is and the numbers it's doing versus the absolute clusterfuck that is their code.
Yeah. Going, oh shit. Yeah, actually, I think maybe this is a brave new world for indie marketing. Say you made it as a joke.
Yeah.
Always go with that. Like, we were making this other game, but we made this by accident. Even if it took you 3 years or whatever, just say that. And then if people like it, then great. And if they don't like it, then that's, I mean, my PR consultancy rates are,
well, joke's on you, because I didn't mean it as a real game.
Yeah, basically I'm trying to implement sort of takesy backsies into this ecosystem. What else have people been playing?
I played a bit of Pillars of Eternity 2 Deadfire.
Excellent. I'd love to play that, but for reasons I described in the last podcast, can't.
Yes, it's very good, and I think I'd have quite a hard time describing it because there's so much of it.
What is dead and on fire in it?
It refers to...
It's a place, isn't it?
Yeah, an archipelago. That was a word.
No, it is. No, it is. It's just funny to me that like it could be anything in a fantasy setting, and like you just span the wheel of nouns, and it came out like it went from like fortress, ancient pact, ancient evil, this magical spell, secret cult, and then it landed on archipelago. Like bing, 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 bing.
Actually, technically, it's a peninsula. It's not.
That's its setting in this chain of islands, in which quite a fun colonial.
As opposed to the bad colonial.
No, I'm a white Englishman. Storyline is playing out where all these trading companies coming over and trying to harvest the natural resources, and all the native tribes of various development are resisting that, and then you get stuck in it because a huge god inhabited a statue underneath your castle and walked off, killing you, and that's a good reason to go on an adventure.
Fair enough.
Because you need to chase him down. It's great. And much like my other sailor game, you get to be a captain of a pirate ship, or just a normal ship, which is its kind of unique thing this time round. You get to manage your ship and find crew and assign cannons of varying specificity. So like you load up your long-range guns on your port side and your short-range guns on your starboard side, and then play through. Its ship combat game reminds me, it works quite well. It's kind of this turn-based multiple choice kind of game. There's a turn order, and you'll choose to do things like go full speed ahead to try and close the distance to get within effective range of your cannons. Then obviously swerve to port or starboard to bring those guns in line with the enemy ship, and jibing, which is a 180, which brings the other guns back in line. And depending on the size and class of your ship, these various actions take a little longer. That aspect of it is kind of weirdly X-Wing miniatures. Like there's almost it's all done by text, but there's this sense of physical space, and facing is very important, and those kind of things.
I just made an interested noise. I really want to play this. Why do I feel compelled to play Pillars of Eternity from the start?
Yeah, you don't have to.
But I do, John.
Do you carry a character over, or is it just total fresh start?
You do, I think.
In fiction, it's the same character, but you're reset to level 1, I think, whether you import it or not.
But that means I have to. It's the same reason I never played The Witcher, right?
Yeah, I guess.
Shit. All right, well, that's July sorted.
Rather than just playing the new game, you will not play the game at all.
Yeah.
Because the burden would be too great to play both.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's got the familiar combat system that anyone who's ever played an Infinity game or their spiritual successors will be familiar with. That real time with pause, like setting your tanks off first and then firing up your spellcasters to do.
Just bottlenecking skeletons all day, every day.
Basically, yeah. I think it's less, they toned down the difficulty a little bit from the first one, which was quite a challenging game. And I found I had to play it at half speed, even when I wasn't pausing. Like every half second counts. You have to get all your character's abilities firing off at optimal points. In the first one, I think they've got a difficulty slider. You can dial it way down if that's not particularly interesting to you. But in this first one, in the second one, it's a little more relaxed, and you can just steamroll through a few enemies, leave it up to the quite good AI system. It's like they have this fairly programmable's a scary word, but reactive AI. So you just say things like, if your health is less than 20%, drink a potion, or but they get a little more advantage, a little more complex. Like, if you could land an AoE on 3 people or more, use this big one.
Oh, that's cool.
Which is quite fun. And it functions to the point where I've just totally ignored it. Like, you guys can just do whatever you want. I'm going to min-max my wizard character, and you guys can just do whatever. And that's getting me through all the encounters, and it's quite fun.
This is actually a better use of my tactical beach wizards pun than the use I found for it.
Yeah.
I've been trying to figure out if I can make a game about practical beach lizards.
I'm sure that's doable. Like, that could be like a crafting.
They brought their towel, they got their sunscreen.
Yeah, exactly.
They're all good.
Oh, I see. So not like, maybe like, I was thinking more of a kind of Survivor, like, kind of angle where like,
That could work.
building beach huts and, you know, demonstrating practical skills and also shedding.
They're having a lot of fun with their quest design. There's kind of a Hitman type quest.
Ooh, I'm
where you
listening.
have to infiltrate a pirate fort, and you can do that in a number of ways, like your classic combat, talky or sneaky, but then much more refined versions within that. And then you can just talk your way into like the final encounter and beat up who you're there to kill, or you can go full Hitman and kind of engineer a catastrophic series of events that will lead to his death, which is fun. And that's like one quest among many.
That's news. Hitman 2. There's a logo for it. It's a thing. Did you see this?
No.
Okay.
Is that it?
Yeah, that's it. I think it's a leak, maybe. But yeah, that there is an official logo for Hitman 2, which, you know, previously we've been thinking there would be a season 2 of Hitman. This is probably that, but they're calling it Hitman 2.
How did the previous one leave you?
It was really good in the end. Sapienza was brilliant. I actually think the last mission they did, Tokyo, oh, no, wait, a Japanese one, Hokkaido, was one of the best. I think that was probably second best after Sapienza. And yeah, they're like, I think Paris is one of my least favorite in the whole series, and they started with that one, which is so that my journey with the series has been really weird because I was totally put off by it at first, and then kind of ended up really liking it. There's a bunch of stuff I don't like about the contract system. It's just the barest hint of a really cool thing that they could do, and they haven't done it. And its whole rating system is bad. It's just about, did you do Silent Assassin or did you fail? Like, it's so antithetical to everything else about the game, which is more about creative expression and trying all these different tactics and stuff. Then the rating screen just says, you did it wrong. You didn't do Silent Assassin. But that's a fairly minor thing. The levels are amazing. Like, the size of the environments and the stuff you can do in them is great. And also they kind of loosened up a little bit. The, Colorado mission I actually really liked, just because it was way more forgiving than the others. You can kind of be anywhere in it, and there are loads of different ways there are loads of different targets, and there are loads of different ways of taking them out. And the time I really like at least is when it's most restrictive, which is Paris, where just both targets have at least 2 bodyguards on them at all times and spend 95% of their time in direct line of sight of like 20 other people. And yes, you can get them out of that situation, but only by using the pre-scripted opportunities, which I don't really love doing because it's kind of just doing what the designer told you to do.
So if Hitman 2 doesn't do those things.
Yeah, I don't know what they'll do, because I don't know if my criticisms are actually that widespread and whether, you know, the problem with these things is always like, people will talk about whether they liked the opportunity system just in general. And I don't have an opinion on that overall. On the Paris level, it was, I didn't like the level because it relied on the opportunity system. On Sapienza, I loved it. And the fact that there's opportunities in it is great because it's just added bonuses in addition to all the other ways you can do the level. And so I don't know on what kind of like granularity they process that kind of feedback, whether people in general agree with my criticisms and whether that got through to the developers. I think they'll probably just do more of the same because it was basically successful. You know, it's really well regarded.
Good. I'm glad that's happening though, particularly with the, you know, like IO's uncertainty and things like that. It's nice to...
I think it's sort of indie, right? They own the rights and they're doing it themselves.
Yeah. So good for them. And I really, really, really want to play Pillars of Eternity Dreadfire. If only I didn't have to play a 200, 300 hour RPG before I was allowed to play it.
First one you can burn through in maybe 40 hours.
That is not an amount of time I describe as burning through.
80 hours the first one and didn't finish it.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. I am very thorough. And they added that thing where you can click on people and then see like a kind of dream vignette memory thing, flash sideways, character, Kickstarter backer piece of fiction. And so I read all of them. And that takes a long time.
That's gone. You'll save a few hours on your...
Okay, well that means I definitely have to read all the ones in the first game. Savor it. I does love reading. I heard about books once. But you don't get to also do maths in a book. Found.
I think I'd actually quite like you to play it and talk about their use of language in it, which is a little odd. In the first one, it feels like they're trying to do a Tolkien and invent their own...
My brain just went to look who's Tolkien now.
They kind of invent they wanted to be quite original, but also stay true to their
I remember this.
D&D roots, and they use a lot of new words. A lot of stuff feels quite Gaelic, but also slightly odd usage of characters and stuff, which makes it feel different. But I don't know if they really landed that. It can be quite hard to parse exactly what's going on, who all the factions are, and what these words mean. And in the second one, for me, their factions are quite hard to comprehend. Like, it's not a problem because they have a really nice system in all their dialogue where you can hover over any noun that pops up. Like, for example, the Valian Trading Company is one of the main factions in the game, and you hover over it and you get a little pop-up box explaining a little bit about it in case you've forgotten who they are and that kind of stuff. But then my major problem is the factions are many and almost indistinguishable because you have the Valian Trading Company, the Devire Trading Company, and they're in conflict with the Raparu and the Hanu, and then there's various castes within those tribes people, and you think you've got kind of a hand on it when it's like, oh, the native people are these guys with squiggly lines on their faces. But it turns out they're in all of them, much like normal, like a real people would be.
Why can't I just judge these people by their skin, damn it?
Yeah, that's for someone who's good with the wordings to have opinions about.
Yeah, like, I think, like, so I don't want to have opinions about this, so I played it. I think I liked Pillars, like, one of the reasons I feel the need to, joking aside, one of the reasons I feel compelled to restart Pillars of Eternity is when I was super into it, I had kind of, like, I have a brain that holds on to lore, as people know, but if it hasn't fully stuck, it goes away again. It's like lore in like a temporary state. And like I was in a sort of like a period of Pillars of Eternity where I did know what its factions were. And I know that my character when I my first run was from the Valian Republic. So that was instantly I remember, oh, Fantasy Venice. Like, you know, kind of it fills in. But it went again because it has no other hooks because it just exists in these games. And I think I quite liked that kind of use of language and sort of recalibration of fantasy tropes. And I wouldn't say it was that different to any number of fantasy novel series. It felt very much like modern sort of epic fantasy. Because the Pillars of Eternity world is slightly more technologically advanced. It's not quite medieval fantasy. And it's not like quite full, like, because they're gunpowder weapons. Like it's
especially in the second one.
Yeah, it pushes closer to sort of early modern, you know, bordering on kind of like, not quite Enlightenment maybe, but like Renaissance. I guess it's like a Renaissance era fantasy, which has some peers in like Warhammer fantasy traditionally. One of the things that sets it aside. But that starts to bring it, I mean, not that any fantasy exists separately from historical parallels or social issues generally, but like, it's funny, like we've sort of gestured around it and joked about it, but like my concern for Deadfire is that it's sort of like throwing fantasy directly at now quite a like pretty shitty period in history, and I'm interested to see how they navigate that. So for that reason, I really do want to play it. The flip side to it, I really like boats. So those two things are, you know, operating in my approach to it. But I actually do I want to give it the maximum chance to kind of like, I think the reason I joke about needing to play it again is because for me, these games, I went back to Baldur's Gate recently, are like worlds you sink into. And I don't ever really want to come in halfway. Like I want to be fully in it by the time I Like, I'm kind of almost nervous about them announcing a new Dragon Age, which they might at E3 possibly, because it kind of means I have to replay Inquisition. And I sunk like 180 hours into the game. I don't have time to do that. And it's dumb that I think that's mandatory. But there's some element of like requiring a run-up or something that like gets me in, like, it allows me to get more out of the game in the long run. It's not just some sort of like weird, it's not some weird sort of self-punishment or something. It's like, it's how I feel. It's not how I get the most out of them is by like occupying those worlds for a long amount of time and sort of like sucking all of the big capitalized nouns out of them and then moving on like a kind of silly word vampire.
Yeah, if they announced Half-Life 3, I would replay Half-Life 2 in preparation for it.
Yeah, exactly. That's a full 10 hours of your life that you're Shall we do some questions from questions?
Oh, this is my favourite bit.
It's the best bit. And this is an especially good one, because we had a very good question, from David, who writes, Dear Thurston's Video Anus, Audio Edition, a joke now 6 or 7 years old. After listening to episode 340, sadly recategorized to 240, I was drawn to listen to the first few episodes of the podcast. In episode 2, one of the questions asks, E3 2018 has just ended, and assuming that you are still in the PC games business, you've been asked for your thoughts on what was shown. What do you think will be the big changes in the industry in 5 years' time? So this is episode 2 from, I think, July 2013. Now that we are living through that post-apocalyptic dystopia once envisioned, what are your revised thoughts on your predictions? Thank you for 5 years of glorious pods. And that's from David. And so, to make sure we were properly prepared for this, we actually went back just now and listened to this sort of 5 minutes or so of episode 2. If you'd like to listen to it yourself, it's episode 2 from about 1 hour, 22 minutes onwards. An episode featuring me, Tom F., Graham and Marsh, and
you better believe they laughed at all their old jokes.
Well, it's more that we had the eerie realization that we sound slightly different, but we're basically fundamentally the same.
Yeah, like Chris said a thing, and in my head I thought of a joke, and then as I listened, old Tom said that joke. Like, oh, fuck.
And right at the end of it, I make a joke that implies that I have no faith that the Great Incredible will still exist in 5 years. From that point. And so good for us. We did, well, we'll do that. In fact, our 5th birthday is actually coming up in July, so we might do something special for that. But, nonetheless, so John, you took some notes as we went through, person by person, in terms of our predictions, which I thought were variously egregiously incorrect. And actually, you could do a face and maybe justify why they were somewhat spot on. Yeah.
I think generally there was, a sense that there would be lots of sequels to games that you didn't know about yet. Marsh was quick with Watch Dogs 2.
A little bit behind. I wouldn't be surprised if Watch Dogs 3 is announced at E3.
Yeah, actually. So we maybe underestimated Ubisoft's sequel cycle there in terms of how long it would take them to get to Watch Dogs.
But Tom was adamant that a AAA title would be incorporating roguelike elements of some sort.
I was like, I very accurately described a phenomenon that would go on to happen, which is like, small indie and mod projects invent some cool new mechanic, and then the big companies all pick it up and run with it, because we'd seen that happen with Dota. And that did happen with Battlegrounds, but I thought it would happen with Spelunky. It didn't.
And for some reason, I take this as an opportunity to talk about Base Hunter. And I guess I now get it why people complained about me talking about Dota on the podcast for like a year.
You were also posited the possibility of a PC conference.
And then and then hilariously, you say, would there be a PC conference? To which me and Graham, people who at the time both worked for PC Gamer, say no. So obviously congratulations to PC Gamer on the 3rd year of the PC conference at E3 this 2018.
Chris was excited by the possibility of Oculus Rift Experience demo booths.
So I just wrote a feature.
Yeah, I think those exist.
Yeah, they do. I just wrote a feature about in situ kind of VR cinema and stuff for Edge magazine. And so I was like, when I was listening to myself saying this, I was like, oh my God, I was actually right about something. Like the use of VR would be in terms of like in situ things rather than in the home experiences at events and conventions. However, I then go on to say in episode 2 that this will be some sort of like tickle based experience where someone tickles you while
you're pretty sure on this. You put money on it.
And I actually put money on it. And no one took me up on this, thank God, because, you know, like.
I'll get in on that action. No tickling in 2018.
So I was right, but as far as like, no, I was dramatically wrong. Unless if someone gets tickled in virtual reality at E3 this year, which could still happen, then I was right, and apparently maybe get some money from Marsh. I don't know.
I mean, that VR climbing game, they blow you with fans while you're going up, which is similar kind of experience.
What I'm saying is, if you're attending E3 this year, actually, I'm not going to tell someone in the industry to tickle someone. That's not. That's just a fucking terrible idea I just had. To go with the fucking terrible idea I had 5 years ago. So.
Between yourself and Graham, you thought there would be esports and wargaming tournaments held within the event itself.
So, yeah, like I thought esports would take a more central role in bringing streamers and YouTubers to E3. I'd say I was right about streamers and YouTubers being increasingly catered to by the way E3 is structured. I was wrong about esports being the vector by which that would occur. And for that, I am sorry and resign my...
Marsh was pretty certain that cloud computing, specifically to power AI, would be in the mainstream.
All the things he predicts are so much like what Microsoft said the Xbox One would do, like when they're announcing it and trying to vaunt it, saying it's got the cloud, and the cloud has infinite computing power, and that will power AI and more innovative gameplay. And they've never seen a single piece of evidence for that.
It didn't. So those sorts of claims by Microsoft, like Microsoft, I feel, particularly when they're in like different tech companies are capable of adopting to varying degrees the sort of futurist, idealist position. And whenever Microsoft do it, there's an implicit, like, Ron Howard voiceover. And that is their curse as a company.
It didn't.
Exactly. Like, Apple somehow have evaded this. Deservedly or not. Whereas Microsoft, I think maybe that is that curse, is that sort of endless sense of, like, bluth.
Very confident of things. Well, they just straight up announce that they're already doing it when it doesn't work yet. Like, this would be a nice idea. We're just going to announce it's already happening and you need our console to do it.
Yeah.
And then...
It didn't.
Finally, Graham, though he didn't know the exact name of it, was adamant that the sequel to Mass Effect Andromeda would be dropping this year.
The thing is, John, it's the right year. He was spot on about what year it would be announced in, if it was going to be announced.
Could it still happen, Chris?
It was, so the way it's phrased was like the sequel to the next Mass Effect trilogy, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, he got the timing spot on. But
is the backlash right? In that a lot of people are currently going, Andromeda was actually pretty good.
And it was pretty good. I said this at the time.
Yeah.
But no one believed me because I always say that.
Do you think I guess we have a good chance of Anthem showing up.
Yeah. We have, actually, I think there's a good chance of Dragon Age showing up. I really do think there's a good chance of Dragon Age showing up because just the right rumblings have happened in the right parts of, the right people are doing interviews all of a sudden.
I'm very curious about Anthem actually, about sort of their level of investment in it and their confidence in it, because I've just never heard anyone say anything nice about it. Like, there's so much hostility to it from all quarters in my sphere of the internet. Like, watching the video, I thought, oh, that looks cool, I might play that. Depending on how mandatory it is for it to be co-op. But yeah, it's just, people are so, like, Mass Effect fans are pissed off it's not Mass Effect. Fans of every BioWare series ever have sort of come out of the woodwork to say, well, this isn't what I want.
It's the one thing they could all agree they didn't want. Previously, it's mostly that's sort of more, interfactional than. So at least it brought everyone together. I think this should be a good year for Anthem to show up and be a video game rather than be a sort of weird, omnidirectional promise video.
Super staged co-op playthrough where, like, actors are, doing the, I just think of it as doing a division, right?
No, this is me being spectacularly wrong 5 years ago, but I thought that sort of esports or like, live play would sort of step in to kind of cater to so I guess I was right in thinking that, the actual experience of play, the kind of thing that lets players relay to their audiences would become more important at E3, which it would. But I didn't anticipate that one of the ways in which that would manifest itself was in the form of actors pretending to be players, which is nonetheless what did happen. Yeah.
A lot of our predictions were all like about single player games, which just thought that that's where the money is. It's not. Yeah. Because you can make infinite money out of people if they care about how their character looks, and they only care if other people are going to see it. Or like what weapon they have compared to other people, or just most of the things you can spend money on, significant money, is about like, I've got this thing other people don't have.
Yeah, I'm surprised none of us, maybe it's not surprising because we were drinking, but none of us predicted that E3 would become a consumer event.
Did it already feel like that from your perspective, or?
I've never been to E3. E3 is the one I'm sort of weirdly disconnected from, apart from watching the live shows. But yeah, so more than anything else, it was just strange to hear what we really thought was going to happen within that framework. Also, it's strange to hear that the original questionnaire sort of like gives us some clues by harking back to what had happened 4 years before we recorded in 2009. And at that point,
we all died.
We all, turned into ash and blew away.
In my defense. So no, the AAA world has not taken on the roguelike format or randomization in any major way. But couldn't it be said, isn't there an argument that something of the scale of Slay the Spire, which I don't have specific sales figures on, but I came 60,000th in the daily challenge, so there's 60 fucking thousand people playing it every day at least. I think that game has to have sold 1 million units already, and it's in early access, which is, it's not, like, it would be meaningless to call that AAA, but there are major games doing roguelike stuff. Like, roguelikes are massive.
Yeah, and also in your defense, it's not unforeseeable that, like, Spelunky 2 shows up at PlayStation's conference at E3, for example. That it's given main stage prominence. That's probably the thing we failed to predict. Like, we saw this happening in terms of those trends being adopted into AAA games, and therefore getting a presence at E3 via that channel. Whereas actually these sorts of designs and these sorts of games do have a presence at E3 through the greater presence of indie at E3.
Was it Sony's conference where they riffled through 50 indie games and had Steve Gaynor up on stage?
Yeah, exactly. So, in a way, we were both right and wrong at the same time. The state we exist in 100% of the time. Good. I think that pretty much addresses our predictions. I don't really want to get into our predictions for 2023 at this point.
Yeah.
Because maybe that's for a post E3 episode in this case.
Yeah, let's see what this year does.
Yeah. Also because this goes from like, I think games will have changed slightly to like year 3 of the Bread Wars. But that's a different matter. In this case, Simon writes, is there any point for a journalist to go to the hassle of visiting E3 anymore? Can you get mostly the same experience watching the trailers online and then standing in a queue for a bit? P.S. Bonus points if you reuse this question when Gamescom rolls around. Regards, Simon. So we've managed to pick a pod lineup of people who are utterly uninvolved in the day-to-day running of game journalism outlets.
But I do remember I only went to E3 once, but it was definitely like you get home and then you find out what happened at E3. It was like, oh, please tell me what happened, because I didn't check the internet when I was out there. I went to my appointments and I didn't see anything else. And same with GDC, every time I get back from GDC, I read up on what happened at GDC.
I'd say that, so a lot of the journalists I know are either heading to E3 or dealing with E3 in one way or another. It's still a really big deal. And even though maybe it doesn't feel like it, I think its role has changed somewhat. It's now, I think, the annual AAA and console show to some extent, because recent history has proven that games can become the biggest games in the world with almost no impact on E3 whatsoever, right? Like, the vectors by which something becomes a massive success have somewhat become detached from the industry's largest circus. However, it's still
super important for a bunch of reasons. Like any website you name will meet its traffic targets in the first half of June or not at all. And that's not trivial. Having worked on websites, I know Asian Top Scene, you could say the same thing. Like that's a testament to how many eyes it draws in such a short space of time. And E3 itself is sort of a game of chicken, I think, between the publishers. Whereas a lot of them would probably do better to have their own events, to curate their own environments, to, show their games to streamers and YouTubers and press in a place that they're not competing for air with literally everybody else at the same time. And a lot of them try it to some extent, pre-revealing things or doing events ahead of time, which is already happening. But none of them can leave unless the rest of them leave, because they're locked into this sort of attention cycle. Because during E3 week, as long as there's a critical mass of the big publishers there, that's where all the eyes will be. So breaking off to do your own thing, unless everyone's doing that, results in nobody seeing your stuff. So for the time being, I think for as long as games by Activision, EA, Ubisoft, Sony, Microsoft are reliably big deals every year on Bethesda, until the day when that stops being the case, E3 will have a role, because it's almost this recursive thing now. It pulls the industry into a single place. So that's kind of where the journalists need to be, because it's not sufficient to have an article in your magazine that's just about the trailer everybody saw. Ideally, you need to have played it. You need to have talked to a developer. You need to, and that access is not easy to arrange when everyone else is getting it from the same place at the same time. So I reckon it's like, maybe this is a more serious answer than the question was looking for, but like, it's a weird thing, because on principle, what a weird, no other industry does this, right? Like, let's announce all of our most expensive, risk-laden things at the same time and just hope we get coverage. And yet it's sort of how the games industry operates, at least at this level. I think what's healthy is that, like you say, like, say Aspire, massive game, sustaining a company. Like, Fortnite, biggest game in the world. Maybe Fortnite, the actual game they wanted to make originally before they accidentally made a Battle Royale game. As a joke. Had some presence at E3, but Fortnite Battle Royale certainly never did. And now, and I guarantee you, at least half of this year's E3 is going to be, you can now get Fortnite or something like Fortnite on X device that previously didn't have it. But that's trend leading E3, not the other way around.
Yeah. God, the Battle Royales are going to be relentless, right? That's my prediction for next week. Which is
going to be literally
not
like
looking too far
100
ahead.
Battle Royale games parachuting into LA, into the Staples Center. And then fighting for dominance. If we had a word for that, it would be fabulous, but we don't. So we don't. And there isn't. Our final question this week comes from Ben, who writes, "You've mentioned a desire to see games do musical numbers as a kind of climax before." I think his "you" is a bit specific. Let's not dwell on that. What set piece from any game in the last 5 years would you replace with a dance number? And what genre of music would it be set to? And that's from Ben.
The Mass Effect dance finale would be funny just because of the understanding that Shepard cannot dance. Like facing off against Reaper with a solid sci-fi techno beat going, and Shepard just throwing uncle shapes.
So here's the thing. That's a really solid idea. However, the first Guardians of the Galaxy movie literally got to that first. A dance-off that secures the fate of a galaxy-destroying object won by somebody who can't dance. So yeah, in principle I would, but in this case, in this pop culture environment,
I just keep thinking of things that are already dancing on musical numbers, like when you're knocked out in Monkey Island 2 and you have a hallucination or sort of unconscious dream of your parents dancing and they become skeletons. I think your parents are dead and you see your dancing parent skeletons telling you the solution to the next puzzle in a musical number, which is, I just feel like games should go back to that.
So I think what I would like is, because the first moment that sprang to my mind was press X to pay respects. And I'd like to extrapolate that across the entire, not just the Call of Duty franchise, but the entire linear, scripted sequence laden shooter genre, and not change them totally, and not necessarily introduce it in the form of dance, but whenever a character says what you have to do, like get into position to breach the door, or press X to pay respects, a chorus of other characters come in the musical theatre manner to go, he's going to press X to pay respects. and then begin to chant this until you do it. And then you're doing it, sets off everyone else doing it. And then everything ends in one of those, like, everyone's walking down the street and there's a brass band kind of sequences. Like, universally. Like a sort of, like a Ferris Bueller, escalation protocol. Like, applied to all, sort of tediously kind of didactic button inputs to join. Because the reason being, all of those things are like press X to feign interaction on the way to the next half of this cutscene, right? So there's no reason not to push it further than the player expects. Like, if you simply deliver on the expected outcome, which is that the door will swing open, everyone will go through the door in slow motion, and then you'll shoot some people, then we've been there, right? Like, what you want is like suddenly everybody's breaching through a door.
Okay, so bear with me on this one.
Yeah, go on.
Merging Monkey Island 2's dream sequence with your dancing skeleton parents and my criticisms of Hitman's rating system. What if, when you finish a Hitman mission, everybody you killed in that mission then performs a dance number about how well you did?
How would this express itself? Would it be like interpretive dance? Would it be to a song?
It would be quiet because you are the silent assassin.
If silent assassins, no one died, so there's no dance party. And then it's increasingly loud depending on how many people are killed. If you're an absolute psychopath and you murdered everybody, it's this huge riotous, like what are those step something movies? The street dancing ones?
Yeah. Oh, Step Up to the Streets.
Yes, there you go. It's like that if you killed everybody. And yeah, there's a discrete number of dances, obviously. It's just impractical to have an infinite number of dances. But there's tiers, if there's like 10 people, it's this dance or less. And if there's 10 to 20, it's this dance. If there's 20 plus, then it's this giant jubilant street number, and they just sing about how great the afterlife is and dance in sequence on the coast of Sapienza.
I think most sort of so I was thinking about this recently. So almost any moment in a game where you're suddenly like super powered. So this is going back further than 5 years, but the end of Half-Life 2, where you get the super gravity gun. And you get that for that one moment, right? This is an escalation on being supersonic, basically. Like, this goes back to the Mega Drive, as far as I'm concerned, in terms of the moment where you become extra you. And classic platformers always knew to give you music with this, right? Like, getting the invincibility power up in Mario or whatever, or in Sonic, that is a dance number to an extent, because it's like, you've got this power now, do a cool dance. And I feel like subsequent games have lost this a little bit. And this could easily be replaced by, characters just breaking into song whenever this happens. In fact, again, I always go back to it, but Saints Row again to do this right. I was thinking about this recently, because Pip and I watched the movie Burlesque, which is not a good movie, but it is a good movie, but not in the way you'd expect that to be the case, simply because it's a movie about Christina Aguilera coming up with the courage to use her ult publicly. Christina Aguilera's ult is very loud honking. Like, she's a very good singer. She's an extraordinarily loud person. Like, that is her superpower. You know this about her anyway. So when she's playing a character, you're not really watching the character, you're watching for the moment when Christina Aguilera ults. And this literally happens in the middle of the movie, and it's set up in exactly this way. It's basically the reveal of a superpower, where she's lip syncing to a burlesque song, but even Kristen Bell pulls the plug cutting the PA system, what's Christina Aguilera going to do? Just honk extremely loudly. And it's brilliant. And Cher's there as well. I don't know why I mentioned this, other than to say that for me, at least, there's a very strong relationship between the sudden expression of power and going, ah! Basically, but in a musical way.
I want to continue this and work out what Christina Aguilera's cue is. Like a fan of thrown knives, or...
I think... So,
Q as in the skill that happens when
like we're thinking about it in a Dota ability, yeah. Like,
not as in like a 1, 2, 3 go.
I think, so there's a sort of, I feel like I don't want to cast any shade on Christina Aguilera because I'm very fond of Christina Aguilera. Right. However, one of Christina Aguilera's characteristics, one of Christina, no, she's also not, because she genuinely seems quite sweet. Like, one of the characteristics of Christina Aguilera, particularly in recent music videos, but also traditionally, is that she always appears to be a bit sticky. So, so I'm thinking maybe like a Batrider sort of system here. I don't know how far you take that.
I mean, it could be the inverse because, I mean, in all her videos, she's probably like greased up a little bit, and all the backing dancers are all greased up. So maybe she gets faster for every stack.
Exactly. This is what I'm suggesting. Yeah, exactly. She gains stacks of dirty. Yeah, and to be honest, like, I feel, she's basically just a hybrid of Batrider and Queen of Pain. Like, that's where Christina Aguilera falls. And, I'd just like to say, I've apparently completely stepped in for Pip on this episode at this point. Trying to think what other kind of, because the thing that catches me out about this question is sort of like moments in games from the last 5 years. And I actually was trying to struggle to pin down, like, like particular sort of, you know, set piece moments or like, story moments that we were like all there for. Because this does take...
The Bioshock moment is kind of a musical anyway.
But that's from almost 10 years ago.
Is it?
That's from 10 years. Really? No, that is from 10 years ago.
Oh no.
Yeah, that sounds right.
But even Bioshock Infinite was more than that, wasn't it? Was it?
More than how many?
5.
I reviewed Infinite for PC Gamer, so I was at PC Gamer then.
Yeah.
And Gunpoint came out 5 years ago, almost exactly. So it must be more than 5 years ago.
Yeah, so we don't even get, the Bioshock Infinite musical number where it's just Drowning Pool. Trying to think, because this is the thing, right? Like, you're right, when we were talking about our predictions from 5 years ago, just now, we were so focused on single player games. But I don't know maybe this is a different question, but what are our shared single player experiences from the last 5 years?
I feel like not that many, because, I don't know, there was a time when it was just Half-Life 2, Far Cry 1, and Doom 3 were all like the same year, and in that era, we were all talking about these water-cooler moments in single-player games.
Yeah.
But these days, you know, the mega hits are, I think, Call of Duty and Battlefield and stuff. And they have single-player campaigns, but I haven't played one in ages, and I never talked about, even the ones I did play, I don't remember. Yeah. Modern Warfare 1 was the last one I remember, like, there were being particular moments that we talked about.
But think about it, right? Like, we all played Bioshock. I suppose Dishonored is something we've all played in the last...
That's so creative that it might be quite rare to actually have similar experiences along the way.
Prey, I guess. I mean, the three of us did
We all talk about Wolfenstein 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, the new Wolfenstein games maybe do fit into this category. And themselves teeter on the edge of music video the rest of the time. Like, or teeter on the edge of musical, I think, simply because of the way BJ Blazkowicz talks. Like, there's an element of, like, his sort of folksy wisdom thing, and the barbecue he'll never go to, that he daydreams about while knifing robo-dogs in the first one. Like, there's something there, right? Like, I'm not sure what.
And then, like, the really big single-player games these days are things like Elder Scrolls and GTA, where it's not about those story moments. Like, we all play them, like, we'll play the hell out of them, and they're mega huge, but they're not defined by story moments.
And there's been a handful of sort of identical Far Cry games in that time.
Yeah.
And even then, like, yeah, I'm just genuinely trying to figure it out, because like there was a common sense, like we'd all played the Mass Effect trilogy, right? Like we did have that kind of common investment in a very story
Except Graham.
rich thing. Except Graham. I think, so I would say that Life is Strange is an example of a story.
I would say that too.
Yeah. That's an example of a story-like game that I think maybe would be cheapened by a musical number, but is begging for the it's begging for the song over the credits treatment, I think, to some extent. Like the John Hughes movie ending, and I appreciate this is the second time I've gone to the John Hughes well in the last 20 minutes, but like, you know, that's, you know.
There's a danger of it devolving into Glee, or...
You say devolving. Yeah, I'm actually really interested by the fact that we don't have the shared, or at least like big single player investments the last couple of years. I guess The Witcher 3 is a big one, but it's not something I'm too familiar with.
It's become a lot less monolithic, I think. Like back in, you know, I am talking about literally like 2004 or whatever, you know, the Half-Life 2 Doom 3 thing. Back then there were just a couple of big players and you were just waiting for their next big thing, and that was the games industry. Like there was a load of things going on around it, but for first person shooters it was just them, and everyone else was so far behind. And these days everything is much more diversified. There is no, you know, if you ask me who is the market leader in single player cinematic first person single player shooters, I have no fucking idea. I couldn't tell you. I can't think of, you know, Wolfenstein 2 is the last big example, but that's only because it's recent. There is no clear leader there.
And it's like Uncharted.
Yeah, I think maybe on console,
consoles,
like
maybe.
if we were a console pod, then maybe we'd be talking about how many God of War moments coulda, shoulda, would have been musical numbers. But Bayonetta got there first anyway, so.
But I think that this is kind of a good thing. It's quite nice that the industry is more diversified and there's just a wider range of things, and loads of those things are mega popular. We're not all clamored around this one campfire, all talking about this one thing.
Yeah, right. And actually storytelling has gotten sophisticated to the point that I can't tell you how you would turn Her Story into a musical. Like, you know, without,
a search engine based musical.
Actually, I'll say this is, it's like, not that, I don't want to say that musicalization necessarily cheapens something, but what I'm saying is that, it's not subtle, and video game storytelling often is unsubtle and, sort of, I guess, pretty sort of rudimentary enough that turning it into a musical is actually almost more honest than whatever it is that actually doing, and talking in the case of Call of Duty or whatever, right? It's fun to turn sort of po-faced, sort of sub-Clancy military yarns into musicals because they kind of deserve it. Whereas video game storytelling has gotten sophisticated in other regards to an extent that, it's almost a credit to the state of storytelling in games that not everything is better if it becomes a full-on fucking big brass band march down the street thing where people shout, everybody, as much as I would like it to be. To be fair, though, the game that has delighted me the most this week is one where I can press G to beatbox. So yes, if you would like to send us a question for a future episode of the Crate and Crowbar, you can do so by emailing us at Chris. Shit.
Just email Chris's personal email address.
Email us at Cress. goodwitheggs.com. Now, email us at questions at crateandcrowbar.com.
A lot of the country's watercress comes from a farm quite close to here.
Does it?
Yes.
Okay. Let's not outro. Tell me more, Tom.
We were driving past it between Shaftesbury and Bath, and my sister said, "Oh, that farm over there, that's where most of the country's watercress comes from." Like the organic stuff, at least.
Damn. We didn't know. And now we do. In this country, at least, if you are listening to this from any other country in the world, this is less useful than it is to the residents of the UK. And even then, its utility is
limited, I would say.
Purely in your desire for fresh cress at an industrial scale. Fresh cress being my Battlegrounds wizard rap name. If you would like to send us a question, it's questions@crateandcrowbar.com in it. It's also at Crate and Crowbar on Twitter. Boy, I'm flagging. This is gin.
There's a YouTube channel.
There is. It's Crate and Crowbar on YouTube / and that. As ever, this episode of the podcast is supported by Patreon, miraculously, and with much thanks to our backers. If you'd like to find out more about how we fund the podcast, you can do so by visiting patreon.com / Crate and Crowbar. Do you have any other things to say? I don't think so.
Did we say the questions address?
Yeah, like twice.
Okay, cool.
And then we talked about Cress.
Okay. The Cress just wiped the whole slate for me.
Indeed. As it does, it's a palate cleanser. If you'd like to follow us as individuals, I'm on Twitter at CThurston, that's CTHURSTEN.
I, Tom Francis, am at Pentadact, PENTADACT.
I am at JOHN_ARR. I sometimes post pictures because nobody likes it when I post words.
And I don't post at all anymore, pretty much.
Nobody likes when I post pictures. I just put words.
Thanks for listening, everybody.